In Queensland, Northern Territory, and Western Australia. It's a good morning. Thank you for joining me for a look inside what imposter syndrome is and how we can move beyond it, particularly if we're suffering for it. But important adjunct to this as well is a little bit about recognizing when it's not imposter syndrome and it's something else. I'm looking at that a little bit later on. So if you've ever seen the imposter syndrome presentation I've done before, this one's a little bit different because we're actually going to be looking at what it is and, of course, what it isn't as well. My name's Dante St. James. Let's get this screen shared and get underway. Not that screen, that's for sure. There's way too much on that screen. Let me just get rid of that and share the right one. Apologies for the false start. Now still sharing the wrong one. Sorry, won't be a second. Things aren't working the way they should be today. Now we should be right. Sorry about this. Has been not my standard starting to a share screen day. We got it. All right. This is brought to you by Business Station and Digital Solutions, part of the Australian Small Business Advisory Services program from the Australian government. Hopefully that's now coming through fine. G'day, Kathy. You're in from Brisbane. I'm sure there's a ton of us in here today. So hello to everyone, no matter where you are in Australia. And if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, you're one of the lucky ones because you get to start and stop as you're going. You don't have to listen to me all the time. So if you do want to watch this a bit later, if there's something you've missed and you'd like to revisit, you can go to YouTube, either through my own channel, which is Dante St. James. I'll have this on in about an hour after the webinar, or to the Business Station channel. Just search for Business Station on YouTube and you'll find a whole range of amazing stuff from the presenters we've got. What we're going to cover this morning is what imposter syndrome is and what it feels like, the impact it has on businesses as well. When we misread imposter syndrome when it's actually something else, really important definition that needs to be put in there. And of course, the steps to overcoming imposter syndrome if you find that it's something that you do happen to suffer from. A bit about me. I've done a lot of stuff. I got a few businesses, about 5 now at last count. Kind of keep starting up a new one every time I get bored with the previous one. I've also studied at University of New South Wales, Sydney, TAFE New South Wales, Western Sydney University, Chartered Institute of Marketing, accredited in a lot of stuff. In fact, if you look at really what I've been doing, I've got 3 bachelors, 2 masters, 93 certifications, and 36 years of digital experience. I'm not telling you this to boast. I'm telling you this to point out the fact that even I, some days, still feel like the imposter. I still feel like I'm trying to prove something, that I'm not really who I say I am. And I just keep going hard and hard and hard and study more and get more certifications, also that I can feel better about somehow taking everyone for some kind of ride. And I've got a little bit of an analysis later on I'll show you about myself that I think you might find very useful for yourself as well. What imposter syndrome is and what it feels like. That's really important because self-diagnosis, I know that we probably shouldn't be self-diagnosing ourselves with psychological disorders. Thankfully, this is not a psychological disorder, more a behavioral thing that we do. What it is, it's feelings of self-doubt that persist regardless of your education, your experience, or your accomplishments. Though I'm a prime example of this. I've got it all over going on, and I've been moving through it for years and years and years now, to the point now where some of the things I put into my life as counters for imposter syndrome are actually things that really help me to move forward because I'm doing them in a much more healthy way. I'm not doing them out of some compulsion anymore. I'm doing them because I have a real reason to want to achieve something or to do something with those qualifications. About 25 to 30% of people who we regard as high achievers, that includes business owners. Business owners are remarkably high achieving individuals. They suffer ongoing imposter syndrome. This is a real true imposter syndrome that really is the sort of stuff that it's almost neurotic, the way that we just have to keep doing it, have to keep doing it, have to keep doing it in order to overcome some imaginary obstacle that's not really there. Now, while there might be 25 to 30% of high achievers experiencing it ongoing, almost on a daily basis, there's far more people experience it as an episodic thing that occasionally pops up where they get to a situation and go, ooh, I really feel like I'm a fake and a fraud and I shouldn't be here. And this is really, I guess, very natural. It's a natural reaction to sometimes doubt yourself. What is not natural is to doubt yourself all the time. That is actually a neurosis. That's something which, needs work on it in order to stop yourself from self-destructing on so many areas. It is much more common in women than men. Up to 80% of women suffer some kind of imposter syndrome at some point in their lives, as opposed to about 65% in men. That said, though, when it comes to the ongoing imposter syndrome, it actually gets a lot closer, where there's about 72% women and about 68% of men who have this as an ongoing thing, but it's still way too many. And like so many things in life, there's such a disparity between how this affects women and how it affects men. And there's a lot of societal impacts on that, a lot of structural things that happen in companies and in business and in politics that really don't help with those numbers at all. Unsurprisingly, people of color and people on the LGBTQIQA plus spectrum are unsurprisingly extra affected. Now, you add disability into that, and when you add people from non-English speaking backgrounds who have English as a second language, when you add in the disabled, then you're adding in a whole other like mess, a Pandora's box of making sure that people are feeling the best they can about going forward with the things they want to go forward with, whether it's business, a job, or volunteering. When you add all these added factors, you go through the roof of the numbers of people who are affected by what we call imposter syndrome. Although we do have to ask the question sometimes, when people who are outside of what we call the mean or the average, who are being disproportionately affected by imposter syndrome, we have to ask, is it actually imposter syndrome, or is it that the systems we've got set up in life favor some more than others? So I think we all know the answer to that. And I'll have a bit more of a look at that later and how we can sort of offset that and the things we can consider, particularly as some of our businesses move from being solo or solopreneur or sole traders through to becoming employee businesses, where we need to actually take care of some of these imposter syndrome traits in the people we work with as well. Now, this is not a diagnosable psychological condition, so you can't take a pill for this. You can't go into therapy, although you can go into lots of therapies for this. There's a lot of counseling that can be done around this, but it's generally something that people will self-diagnose for themselves because they understand what some of their patterns are. That, of course, requires you to be a little bit self-aware of what your behaviors are and the things that drive you. So what are the triggers when it comes to imposter syndrome? What are the things that we understand are going to cause an episode of this if you're someone who does get this episodically? Quite often it's recognizing success. It's all around when somebody recognizes some success from you or gives you an award or a prize or something like that, where you are being put in front of people and stood out in front of people, and it sets off a need for almost like a false humility, where it's like, oh, I was in the right place at the right time, or, oh, it wasn't really me. It was just, I've always just been kind of good at this. I didn't really work that hard for it. Or, oh, look, I had to work about 10 times harder than everyone else to get here because I'm not particularly talented in anything. So therefore it's a really hard job. It's exhausting with imposter syndrome. It really is. It can come up when you're passing an exam, for instance, where you thought, oh, wow, I didn't think I'd ever pass that exam because, I've, not really studied that much. And then you pass it and you think, oh my goodness, I'm some sort of fraud. I just happened to fluke that I actually passed this exam. Or it could come up when you're getting a promotion at work. If someone gives you a leg up, they give you a bit more responsibility and you're going, oh my God, I've been faking my way all the way along to this. Imagine what a fraud and a fake I am now that I've got a promotion. You can see how you can put yourself through a personal hell when it comes to dealing with this, couldn't you? And with your case, being a business owner like myself, succeeding at business is one of the ones that really gets you forward. So you go, I've just been doing my thing, working along, doing my thing. Suddenly I'm a success and things are working. What's wrong? Because it can't be me that caused this, because I'm a fraud and I'm a fake. How could I be the cause of this? And then you start looking for all these other reasons why your business might be a success. And you begin telling the story, not just to yourself, but to everybody, about why your business happens to be a success. So what does imposter syndrome actually feel like? What is it that you're going to go through in your head when this comes up? And it's something like, I'm a fraud and eventually everyone's going to find out. It's like being a kid and you're lying about something and you just know that your mum's going to find out about it in some way, shape, or form. She's going to work it out. Everyone thinks I'm good at what I do, but really, I'm just lucky. These are the kind of thoughts that go through your head. And you might think this is not too powerful, really, but when it starts saying things like, I don't really belong here, and at some point, everyone else is going to realize that too, or I didn't earn this, I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. You're going into a place where people are going to get that little bit edgy around you. They're going to get a little bit, they're going to think of you as untrustworthy. They're going to think of you as almost the fraud that you think you are, even though, ironically, you're not a fraud or a sham. You've actually worked your butt off to get to where you're going. But because you're convincing everyone else that you're a sham, they start to believe it as well. So some of the things you may do behavior wise, you might stop others from pointing out your success. So you'll never ever go for awards. I've been a special at this up until the last couple of years. I refused to let people nominate me for awards because I felt like I was just, a total fraud and I shouldn't be given awards for anything. And then recently I've allowed that to happen. I've been in the running for quite a few now over the last few years, and it's been, a good experience. It hasn't sort of crashed me when I haven't won, but it also hasn't caused me to have some sort of imposter syndrome when I haven't won as well. What we may do is also sabotage ourselves from being promoted to prevent attention being drawn to ourselves. So if you want to draw attention to yourself, or you're not the kind of person who really wants to draw attention to yourself because you think you're fake and you're a fraud and you're a sham, then of course you don't want to have a promotion or you don't want to win an award because it only draws more attention and puts you under more pressure for people to think, oh, they're going to work this out eventually, that I'm an absolute sham. It also drawing attention to other factors to make up for your lack of attention or your attention, intelligence. This is where, for instance, you'll say, well, the economic times are really good. COVID's been very good to me. There's been a real rush towards digital products. So that's really a lot more responsible for the success than anything I've really done. So it's actually not taking any sort of credit for your success and drawing it over to other things to say, oh, don't look at me for the success, it's these things over here. Your success is just maintaining an illusion that you're competent. So I don't know where this comes from. Well, I have a fair idea where it comes from. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this webinar. Your success is just maintaining an illusion that you are competent. What a way to live. What a way to spend your life. Just basically thinking that you are a fraud, you're fake, you're not who you put out there isn't who you are at all, and that you're just maintaining a smoke and mirrors atmosphere to make people think that you're competent, even though you think you're not. It takes a lot of hard work to get there. What it all comes down to, you can't enjoy success because it always feels like you don't deserve it. You always feel like you're not meant to get it. You always feel like someone else should get it, not you, even though you've done all the work. You've done all the study. You've done all the commitment. You've done all the investing and the time and the money. Why can't you take credit for it? Imposter syndrome is insidious. It affects so many areas of our lives so often. It leads you to feeling eventually, when it's not dealt with, anxiety, depression, and guilt. These are three things you do not want to live with. Anxiety is just going to cripple you from ever doing anything again. Depression is going to cripple you from ever having the motivation to do anything again. And guilt will give you such a fear of doing anything that you'll just never step forward again. And this is not where you want to be as a business owner. As a small business owner, you need to have the ability to step out. You need to have the ability to motivate yourself. You need to have the ability to move past guilt and move into, triumphing and an abundance method of an abundance attitude that brings good things to you, while you are actually in control of those bringing of good things to you. You don't want to end up like this. No one wants to end up like this. Unfortunately, with a lot of untreated or undiagnosed, or more correctly, unaddressed imposter syndrome, this is the end product for people who just won't deal with this. Now, it may not happen this year, it may not happen next year, but after 10 years of constantly telling yourself that you're a failure, a fraud, and a fake, then eventually you really, really do believe this, and it has really serious psychological consequences that will take you into much deeper therapy. And if you don't deal with this stuff now, even with just a few very simple things you can implement into your life, then this is kind of the stakes. This is where it leads. This is where it goes to. And it also leads to others seeing that you're a fake, that you're full of false humility, and you're untrustworthy. Why would you trust someone who's constantly telling you not to trust them? Why would you take anyone seriously who's always telling you all the time about, in a really condescending, false way, that they are not who they say they are? That if you're telling people that you're fake because, oh, it's not really me that achieved this, there's something else that achieved this, why would anyone want to work with you? Why would anyone want to buy from you? Why would anybody want to trust you? So, how does imposter syndrome manifest itself in our lives and in our work? There's a few ways and a few types of imposter syndrome, and you're probably going to recognize some of these in yourself. First of all, we have what is called the superhero. Now, the superhero works many, many more hours. They're usually there before everyone else, finished before, after everybody else. They're overworking to cover their own feelings of inadequacy. The words are not coming out well today. They are just basically trying to work as hard as they can for as many hours that they can because they feel like they're not actually adequate when they're working within the hours that are allotted for them. For the 7.6 hours a day that they may be there, or in the case of owning a small business, more like 10 hours a day, they feel like they're not doing enough and they're not good enough. So they have to work harder and longer than everybody else in order to be somehow equal with them. What they end up doing is far exceeding the performance of everybody else, but at what cost? Now, I've got a bit of superhero in me, and I'll show you my assessment very shortly about how there's a lot of these different types can tie together. So, if the superhero isn't really you, you're not really one who's prone to overworking to cover your feelings of inadequacy. Maybe this one's more you, the natural genius, the person who's been told all their lives how clever they are, how smart they are, how they're like naturally good at everything they touch. You know, the bit of a Midas touch, everything they touch turns to gold. Well, in the case of the natural genius, when they grow up, they develop a constant need to set unrealistic standards for themselves, not necessarily for everybody else. In fact, they don't want to set lots of unrealistic standards for everybody else because they need kind of everyone else to be dumber than them. They need everyone else to perform less than them in order for them to maintain this illusion that they are some sort of natural genius, that they learned that they were in school or high school or maybe in university where they were someone who very, very popular, very special, and then suddenly out in the real world, they're nothing. So they set these crushing standards for themselves. And I call them crushing because when they don't reach them, they are crushed. They are impossible to reach in the first place. And then they get deeply depressed and upset when they don't reach those unrealistically high standards. This is a person who is never enough. Everything else, it's that song from The Greatest Showman, that Never Enough song. You know, all the shine of 1,000 spotlights will never be enough, will never be enough. This is exactly that person. Except they don't necessarily want the shine of 1,000 spotlights. They just want the internal satisfaction of knowing that they beat this unattainable goal because that's kind of what they've been doing all their lives. Doesn't sound like you, or maybe this one does, the expert. They're never satisfied with their level of knowledge, always have to be learning more, collecting more badges, collecting more certifications, doing more study. Doesn't sound familiar at all to me. Yeah, this is exactly where I sit. This is one of the big ones for me. So you might find you're the kind of person who has to know more about the topic than anybody else in order to maintain some illusion that you're smarter than everybody else. The reality is the fact that you are studying so much is actually not a bad thing in itself. The fact that you are able to keep going and keep going is not a bad thing in itself. Adding more knowledge to your arsenal is a great thing to do. But it's when it becomes one of those things where you are working unrealistic hours, never taking breaks, taking up all your weekends and all your holidays and all that studying stuff. That's when you're into the world of neurosis. That's when you're doing something compulsively. You're not doing it out of a love or a passion for it. You're doing it because you have some sort of undescribed, undefined draw to it that you have to do it. Otherwise, you feel like the world will crash down around you. Then, if the expert isn't you, then there's always the perfectionist, the person who's always seeking the flaws in their work, not necessarily looking for the flaws in everybody else's work. Remember, the idea of being an imposter syndrome sufferer is that other people, their performance doesn't matter as much as yours does. So, this is all about seeking the imperfections in every single thing you do and not seeing your strengths, not understanding that you're doing a lot of really good stuff. You're working a lot of really good things. You're doing so much that's good, but you'll always see the faults, that one spelling mistake, that one, 2 pixel line that should have been a 1 pixel line, or the slight misplacement of that thing on a presentation of that element. These little things will drive you crazy. And every time you go and look for the flaws, you will naturally find them. There's flaws in everything. You can't do anything perfect, but you'll always keep going for it. And if you don't reach the perfection, then you always feel like a failure. And because perfection doesn't exist, again, you're always going to be fulfilling that prophecy yourself. It's by making yourself always the person who fails to perfectly deliver something. Then there's the soloist, or what we call the rugged individual. This is a very, very big thing in Western societies because we fear working with others because we are afraid that at some point it'll be shown up that we're not as good as everybody else. So we hide off and work on our own. Um, and then when things go wrong and we can't overcome a particular obstacle, we don't like working with others and we won't like asking for help because asking for help is showing weakness or it's showing that you're somehow incompetent. Now, people who are soloists are generally soloists because they got there because they're so good at what they do that others can't live up to their expectations. This is a little bit different to the perfectionist. The perfectionist tends to put their perfectionism on themselves. The soloist tends to put a level of perfectionism or quality or achievement on everybody else. And if they can't reach that, they just go, you know what? And here's the most common thing said by a soloist: I just might as well do it myself because if you're going to do it right, you should do it yourself. And things like don't send a boy to do a man's job or something like that. It was always saying that basically they can't delegate. They can't delegate because they can't trust anybody, and because they think that if someone else carries it out, that shows a failure on their part. That they can't do it all on their own, which nobody ever asked them to do. They can't do it on their own. Then they are somehow incompetent, or they're somehow a complete and utter failure. So you'll see this little circle here of circles. Start with the superhero at the top, the natural genius, the expert, the perfectionist, and the soloist. We don't all sit in one circle usually. We usually have little bits and pieces of different circles. You might be a little bit superhero, but a lot soloist. You might be a lot of perfectionist, but not very much expert at all. When I do this sort of assessment myself, I turn out a little bit like this. Now, yours may look completely different, but the superhero and the expert are very strong in me. So is the soloist, very, very strong. I'm definitely not a perfectionist though. I kind of conquered that one about 10 years ago when I realized that done is better than perfect. And the natural genius seems to be one of those things because I tend to be very good at everything I do. But that's also because I kind of have shaped my life into kind of going in the direction of everything I'm good at already and just becoming better at it. So this is a really important part of the imposter syndrome game, is that you need to be willing to assess yourself. You need to be willing to look at these types and go, is there some of me in some of that? Am I someone who really just likes to work on my own because basically I like to control everything, or I like to be the martyr? The soloist is often the martyr, a bit like the superhero. They like to swoop in at the end of the day and save everybody, and everyone goes, "Oh, yay, they did it!" And this can show up in all sorts of sabotaging. For instance, in the superhero mentality, quite often they will procrastinate a lot in order for things to fall so far behind that at the end of the day, they've got like 2 days to finish this massive 6 month project. And they just work like a slave for the last 2 days, getting this amazing submission, and the work is done. And everyone roars in applause and tells them how amazing, how hard they've been working for this, when you really have sabotaged it yourself. To be the hero, you had to work hard at the end because you didn't work hard the rest of the time. Because at some point you said, well, it doesn't matter because I'm going to get it all done in the end anyway, because, I'm terrible at time management, which means I'm a bit of a fraud as a manager and as a project manager and as a worker. So, I'm just going to, yeah, I'll just save it until the end and procrastinate, and I'll get it done in the end because, this stuff comes so easy to me. It's not like I'm going to show them that I work really hard, but in reality, it's not really that hard. I just worked for 2 days. You can see how these things kind of eat at you. They eat at you all the time, making you worse and worse and worse, making it harder for you to be seeing yourself as someone of worth, someone of any sort of ability, someone of action. You'll end up being just somebody who kind of reacts to everything in life, because reality is you don't think you are a superhero, a natural genius, an expert, a perfectionist, or a soloist. You just think you're incompetent. You just think you're just not really capable of anything because someone once upon a time told you that. You could be someone who works way too many hours. You could be someone who studies endlessly, collects badges and certificates, has to push to work with others. That doesn't naturally come to you. That's my diagnosis of myself. Yours might be a little bit different. What is yours? Are you someone who tends to, collect all these certifications? You want to be the smartest person in the room. Academia is full of this, where people are constantly trying to prove themselves and justify themselves that they're a little bit smarter than everybody else. And I'd say that every PhD candidate has ever gone through this process of imposter syndrome, where they have to push so hard to get this PhD, not to get the work done for anyone else, but to prove to themselves that, oh yes, I'm not an imposter after all. But then through the whole process, they feel like one anyway. How does imposter syndrome then impact businesses? What's the impact that happens on business, society, the economy, people around you? To do that, we need to look at the fact that it does affect your colleagues, it does affect your customers, and it does affect the economy. So there are bigger effects to your head games than what there is, than what you may realize there are. It's affecting not just you, it's affecting people around you. In the case of colleagues, there's going to eventually be a massive loss of trust. If you tell someone enough times that you are not to be trusted, if you tell someone enough times that you are not the true architect of this success, if you tell someone enough times that something else is the reason for why the success is happening, they're going to believe it. You tell someone anything enough times, they're going to believe it. So you really want to create this idea that you are not who you say you are and that you're a fraud and a failure. Then keep telling people that. It'll work. They'll stop trusting you, which then puts a strain on group morale. If you're working with other people, whether it's suppliers, partners, employees, just colleagues, anyone really, mentors, it gets so tiring listening to someone who's constantly always going, oh no, I know I did really well, but there's a lot of factors to this. The economy was really good, and really it was all based upon the work that others did before me. When you're constantly using what I call a false humility, it's exhausting to listen to. And in fact, it causes a resentment. People around you are not impressed by your imposter syndrome. People around you are not impressed by your false humility. We can see through it. People can see through these things because remember, 70 to 80% of them have been through this themselves. They know exactly what you're doing. They know exactly what you're going through. They may not have a name for it, but they know what it is and they know how it feels. So they look at it and go, well, because I recognize that in myself, I'm just going to resent that in you because it's so ridiculous. It's like you're drawing so much attention to yourself because you feel bad about your abilities, or you feel so bad about your perhaps your feelings towards um, um, yourself and your abilities and your competence. And it gets tiring. People are going to grow very tired of it. That one friend in your group who's just always whinging about something and they're so negative that they end up not being invited to things anymore. You become that person, which is probably great because then it just instills in your mind that you're a failure and that you're a fraud. No one wants to be around you. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So dangerous, this stuff. Customers will feel awkward when you start entering into these discourses, when you start telling them just how incompetent you are, or how you weren't really the cause of the success. Customers will often compliment you on your work, particularly if you're in the arts. And this is massively rampant in the arts. If you're making artworks and then someone's complimenting you and saying how wonderful your artworks are, that your paintings are amazing, your choices of colors are just phenomenal, rather than just saying thank you, we like to enter into I've always been able to paint. I guess I got it from my mother. She was the one who probably instilled it in me. She used to do a bit of painting herself. Anything to draw attention away from you, the fact that you painted that painting, will go to extraordinary lengths to get away from that. And it's really awkward for a customer to go through this. And just like with colleagues, the more you tell your customers that you're not responsible for the brilliance, you're not the one who was the success, you're not the one who was capable of this, you're not the one who was talented, the more you're telling people this, they will not trust you. If you're not responsible for that beautiful painting and something else is, why are they buying it from you? And it also becomes part of the word of mouth. If you're at a market stall and you're selling some amazing essential oils that you put together out of bush foods and natural ingredients from the Australian outback, and then someone says, oh, these are wonderful. And says, oh, yeah, look, I've been really lucky. I guess it's more to do with, the knowledge I've been able to get from other people who've done this before. And they start hearing that, suddenly the word gets around and it's like, oh, these are fantastic products, but just don't talk to the owner about it because they're so negative. And this is something that comes across to customers when you're someone with imposter syndrome. You're so used to putting yourself down. You're so used to absolving yourself of responsibility for your success that you become known for it. You become that person who's known for it. And again, that resentment starts to come through where other artists, other people who are selling in the market, other people in the shopping center, other people you work with, they start to resent you because you are a drain. You're an emotional vampire because you need so much validation all the time and then when you get it, you reject it because you have this imposter syndrome that says you can't accept any of that validation. So there's this endless cycle of looking for validation, getting validation, rejecting validation, looking for validation, getting validation, rejecting validation. It's just a bloody mess. And it also affects the economy. Can you imagine over an entire economy, excuse me, over the whole population of how many people have wasted how much time on explaining why they are not the successful one, why they're not the success, why they're not responsible for the success, all that wasted time every single year. And then there's the lack of innovation that takes place. The amount of people who will never innovate on a new idea or never come up with a new idea or never have the courage to go out there and have a new idea because they have this imposter syndrome. They just go, I've got this idea, but no one's going to like it. I've got this great solution to this problem, but I'll never be able to carry it out. I'd love to be able to change the world, but who am I? I'm no one. That little voice inside your head that says you can't, who do you think you are? That's imposter syndrome. It also leads to a lack of excellence. It means that the energy that we're not putting into the product or the service to make it the very best in the world of what it is, we're then sort of putting into this self-doubt, this frenzy of self-talk that's going around and around and around our heads, and it's just repeating itself over and over and over. There are big impacts. So when we come to misreading imposter syndrome, this is where I want it to sort of take that imposter syndrome thing we've got this idea of, and then I want to actually position something else, that sometimes imposter syndrome isn't imposter syndrome at all. The fact is, in this country, we have some sobering facts when it comes to inequality. Those inequalities can come to the fact that women in Australia are paid 14.2% on average less than men. That's inequality. That's not imposter syndrome. The fact is that this increases to over 30% with Aboriginal women. That's not imposter syndrome. That's a fact. Add to that then areas such as migrant women. It could be up to 50% difference in pay rates between migrant women and non-migrant men in what they're paid. This isn't imposter syndrome. I can tell you now that these women are not walking around with imposter syndrome to get themselves paid less. These women are not walking around with imposter syndrome to get them paid less. And these women are working their butts off. So they're certainly not walking around with imposter syndrome for being paid less. What happens though is imposter syndrome isn't always the cause of what we see in the workplace or in our businesses. Sometimes it is that it's someone just saying very, very thoughtfully and nicely that, girl, you have a serious case of imposter syndrome. You're turning around saying, excuse me? I am not. I have to fight against a glass ceiling. I have to fight against, people who don't recognize me because of my accent, or they don't listen to me because of the color of my skin. That's not imposter syndrome. So sometimes the lack of performance, the lack of ability to perform isn't caused by imposter syndrome, but by systems that happen to be against you. There's a big difference between secretly doubting your abilities and being made to feel as if your identity makes you unworthy of your position or of your accomplishments. So this isn't imposter syndrome. This is a system that's set up to make you feel like this, which eventually, I guess, causes imposter syndrome. It brings it about and makes you in a position where you go, well, if I'm not responsible for this, I can't really reach there anyway. I'm just another person who's not, like the rest of people, and I'm just going to get caught up in this and all that. How do we move past imposter syndrome though? Now that we know what it is, now that we know what it isn't, how do we get ourselves together to move past it? First, you need to understand where imposter syndrome comes from. Where did it start? Now, we already show that there's some societal structural things that can bring imposter syndrome on. And to me, that's not imposter syndrome. That's just a fault with our society that needs to be addressed and is being addressed little bit by little bit. Probably not fast enough. Could go a little faster. So where does this all come from? Apart from that, it starts, as you would probably think, in childhood. It starts particularly with kids who are pressured a lot to achieve at school or in sports or in the arts, whether they showed some talent at running as a kid, and then they got really hard, push really, really hard to the point where they just couldn't do it anymore, and they either gave it up or they kept going regardless. Students who are very good at maths, who anything less than 100% in an exam was a failure. Or it could be in the arts, they could be a ballet dancer, and she could have been dancing ballet and loving ballet, but over time being told that you're not good enough, you need to perform better, you need to go better, no, that's not good enough, that's not big enough, you need to lose more weight, all those things that gather up to become a problem. end up being something that that child takes into their adult life. Now, you think, of course, you want your children to achieve, you want your children to achieve high, but this is sometimes the offset of that. Sometimes without the also the positive affirmation of what they've been doing, if you're just pressuring through negative and not some positive affirmation, this can come out later in life as imposter syndrome. Another one is controlling or violent parenting. This is naturally going to cause a whole lot of other problems in life. This is not just imposter syndrome. There's neuroses and psychoses that come about this. Severe psychological and psychiatric trauma can be shown in this. But this is not what we're talking about. I'm just talking about controlling and violent parenting, which is somehow trying to drive a child to achieve, 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 achieve. It's like taking the previous kind of parent and amping it up by 100 to the point where you're punishing people. You're punishing small people, your children, to perform so hard and so well that when they do perform hard and well without you, they'll feel like an imposter because they go, oh, yeah, I only got here because my parents, drove me to it. I only got here because I was punished until I did it. I only got here because I had no choice. They'll never take any responsibility for their achievements, even as adults, like 30, 40 years after the abuse, because they'll always have to track it back to, oh, I didn't really have much choice. I always had to. And if I didn't, I'd get whacked, I'd get smacked, I'd get beaten up. So this kind of thing is really, really dangerous, and it can come from here. So if you've got any of this in your background, I really do take my hat off to you because you've come a long, long way. And anyone that you've got a bit of this issue with imposter syndrome, we all get it from somewhere. An unbalanced emphasis on our child's natural talent can often lead to that whole, what they call the natural genius part of being imposter syndrome. This is where a kid can just be really good at something. Let's just say they're really good at playing the piano. They just naturally took it up and just knew what they were doing with it. And then given some guidance, they were able to do better with it and better with it and better with it until the point where they have to really work hard to compete in things like a Stedfords and doing concerts and in competitions or in exams when they're going through the AMEB examination processes, that they will then have to go a little bit beyond just that natural talent. So what they will do quite often is go, well, I didn't really work hard for this. I've just got natural talent because everyone keeps telling me I've got natural talent. Now, whilst shining a light on people who are naturally talented and while encouraging people who are talented to continue their talent, putting an unnecessarily unbalanced and over the top emphasis on how very talented they are over and over and over again, being told, you're so talented, you're so talented, you're so talented, then negates the hard work they've had to do as well. If you're just getting told that you won that because you're so talented, not because you worked your butt off to do it, in later life, that will show out for you as being a problem. Then you'll be, oh no, I'm just really just naturally good at this, I guess. So I don't really have to work that hard. So I guess it makes me feel like a bit of a fraud because everyone else around me has to work their butts off. But no, to me, this is just easy. This can really harm you later in life. Another area it comes from is sharply criticize mistakes, not just from parents. I'm going to give the parents a bit of a break here. It can be teachers, it could be mentors, it could be anyone in your life who made it so that a mistake, and it could be in your adult life. This isn't just a kids thing. This is right through adulthood. It could be your first years in university. It could be your first job, the first day of your job when you make an epic mistake and you're sharply criticized for it. And that immediately makes you think, I shouldn't be here. I'm a fraud for being here. I don't even know how I got this job. It's weird. I'm just not meant to be here, but I guess I got to push on because I've got the job now. You can see how that can stack up over time, and you make another mistake and you get that reinforced to you again and again and again for every single mistake you make. And trust me, right throughout career and right throughout building a business, you are going to make some whopper mistakes. And if you're going to keep bashing yourself and calling yourself a fraud and a fake and a failure every time you do make those mistakes, it does add up. Repeated behaviors cause repeated habits, and those habits then shape your life. So if your habits are to beat yourself up and call yourself a fake and a fraud because you made a mistake in something, it's just going to keep cycling around again and again and again and further packing down that attitude in your life like cement. So it's really hard to break through later in life. If you attack these things early in your life, they're really easy to undo. When you attack them in your 40s and 50s, like I'm assuming a lot of us here on this call are, then you've got that problem where you're so used to doing things that way and so used to thinking that way that it almost feels wrong to think any other way. And that comes from all the things that have happened to us and things we've taken on. High performers in primary and high school, these are a particularly good case because you hear it often said as, oh, she peaked in high school or he peaked in primary school. They were like a shining light, a really smart kid in primary school and high school and went going amazing. And then got to university or TAFE or something like that and just kind of crashed. Just wasn't them because then they got there, they realized that this natural talent, this natural ability they had to get through high school and primary school, right through into university, wasn't going to cut it in the real world. So they feel like, oh my God, I'm a fake, I'm a fraud, I'm a failure. I've just been coasting all my way through life. Now I've hit this brick wall. Who am I? I'm an absolute failure. I'm an absolute fraud. And that's where the imposter syndrome can kick in for so many people, particularly in the corporate area and for business owners as well, who may have gone through some kind of tertiary study and didn't do particularly well at it. This is where imposter syndrome might have begun. And of course, existing mental health issues. If you've already got depression, if you've already got anxiety, if you've already got any number of diagnosed psychological problems, mental illnesses, of course you're going to feel some sort of anxiety when it comes to making decisions and changes and taking big steps in life and in business because you've already got that barrier to get through before you even get there. So you feel like in a world of people who seem to be motivated and preaching the gospel and going forth and doing great things and setting up massive businesses and being super successful in a world like that, where you're just struggling to wake up in the morning and change your underwear because you're so down and depressed, of course you're going to feel like a fraud when you finally do succeed in something because your mental illness is going to bring you back, because your imposter syndrome brought on by your mental illness is going to keep bringing you back again to what's easier to do. And that's just to lay there and to feel uncomfortable and depressed and anxious. I'm not giving any kind of mental health advice here. I'm just saying that these things lead to each other. And if you're trying to overcome these things, yes, it's important that you do go and see a professional and address mental health issues because they will continue to feed things like imposter syndrome. Poor training and mentoring in new roles. This is something I've struck many times in my careers. I've had a few careers now where you sort of get the job and then you just sat in a room and you with a computer and you're like, get to work. I remember one of my earlier jobs that I had with Optus in a call center. We went through 4 weeks of training before we were even allowed to go out onto the floor. We did so much practicing, so much shadowing, so much buddying, so much training side by side, so much psychological training to deal with people as they're calling you. 4 weeks before we even hit the call and started to take those calls from customers. It was amazing, like that level of training. But then most of the jobs I've been in, which have been smaller businesses, have been a case of turn up, here's your systems, here's your email, get to work, buddy. And then when you make mistakes or you don't know what you're doing, you have to question yourself and go, why do they hire me? I'm a constant screw up. I'm constantly messing this up. I'm a failure. I'm a fraud. I must have somehow tricked them into employing me because I'm not made for this. Now, a little secret here, every new business you're going to start, every job you're going to begin is going to feel like that. For the first couple of weeks, you're going to feel totally incompetent. And that's the whole point of training, about mentoring, about people helping you to get ready and get going with it. When I first started with this program, in fact, I had to learn new systems. I had to learn how to reach out to people and get them to register the right way. And sometimes I'd do it so wrong, I wouldn't do the reporting right, or I'd mess something up and it just wouldn't go the way it's meant to go. And I'd be going, oh gosh, am I ever going to get good at this? Am I ever going to get good at this? This seems like a stupid procedure. And then you got used to it. And now it's just part of the day. Setting up for a webinar, it's just something you do. Going to meetings, just something you do. Preparing for a one-to-one client contact meeting, you know what to do and you know how to finish it and you know how to move on to the next step of it. You have processes that are now embedded into your habits that allow you to do it. So if you don't have those things and you're just forced to just wing it, then of course you're going to feel like a failure and a fraud. That's not on you. That's on your workplace. Or if in case it is your business, yeah, that kind of is on you. You might be the person who's actually perpetuating that by causing that problem in other people who are working for you. So moving past it, what do we do? How do we address this and move past it? The first thing I'm going to say is that you probably need to open up and be honest with at least someone. And I'm going to take a bet that if you are feeling like imposter syndrome is a thing that you're going through, you probably haven't told anyone about this. Your best friends may not know about it. Your closest colleague may not know about. Your boss probably definitely doesn't know about it. Your family doesn't know about. This is something which you're struggling with alone. I did a study back in 2016 as part of my master's thesis in business information systems, which talked a little bit about this. And it found that 77% of those who talked with a friend, partner, or family member about their imposter syndrome felt that it contributed positively to them overcoming it. It's a good first step. Opening up and talking about it has to be, you shouldn't, as Brene Brown would say, we don't tell our stories to just anybody. People have to earn the right to be able to receive our stories. So this has to be someone close to you who is not going to dump you, judge you, or somehow put you out to pasture just because you have opened up to them with something intensely and incredibly personal. So you choose your audience wisely. LinkedIn is not your audience. Facebook is not your audience. I'm talking about one person, just one person to open up to, and it will make a significant difference to your ability to be able to move on with this. And if you can't find a one person in your life to do it, open up to a professional, whether it's a therapist or even a mentor in a digital solutions session or something like that, where you can open up and go, yeah, that's me. This is what that struggle is. That at least gets you on the path to be able to move past it. Secondly, by focusing on the facts and not the feelings, you'll understand that your feelings about your own success and abilities are actually irrelevant. The facts are in the outcomes. The outcomes are that people in your life love you. You got the job after you were vetted for the job. You got the job done because you got the job done. And you won the award because you were judged the winner. And this is a very big mindset shift, which I don't expect you to be able to do overnight, but I expect that something which with a little practice, this might be able to become part of your life. It's like looking at a dead flower and saying the flower is dead because the flower is dead. It's not putting any extra judgments or stories around it. You're not trying to wrap it all up in a story to justify anything. You're just saying what it is. So when you look at just the facts, not the feelings, the sky is gray, it's raining. You're not then ascribing a meaning to that. It's raining because it always rains when I want to do something special. The sky is gray because every time I want to go out and take photos, the sky happens to be gray. You're ascribing some personal fault of yours towards a judgment on something which you have no control over whatsoever. Nobody turned up to my webinar because I must be a terrible presenter. Whether I say then instead, nobody turned up to my webinar because nobody turned up to my webinar. I don't need to explore the reasons for that. For me personally, I can look at it and go, well, I'm not really in control of the amount of people who can come to my webinar. So it's no reflection on me. Or I can simply just go into imposter syndrome land and go, yeah, well, it's because everyone can see I'm a failure and a fraud. So therefore they're not coming to my webinars. It can really change the world for you, not just with imposter syndrome, but everything else. Now, just because you don't feel like you fit in, you like to be a bit of a loner, doesn't mean it's actually a bad thing. Sometimes not fitting in is actually a good thing. People who are good at what they do, they tend to stand out. So those kind of people, standing out's not a bad thing, even though in this society, in this particular country, we tend to have this tall poppy syndrome thing where we just continually cut down those who are doing so much better than us. It's out of a sense of jealousy, it's out of a sense of, misplaced equality. People who've worked on their brand, they are the ones that stand out. People who help others often, they stand out. Friendly, inclusive, knowledgeable people, people who are better at something than others, they will stand out. These are not bad things. They're all actually phenomenally good things. It's amazing to be stand out, but it doesn't make you a failure or a fraud if you don't stand out. And it doesn't make you a failure or a fraud because you're not a particularly sociable person. You can be as introverted as you like and still be highly successful and good at what you do. How you feel about that, that's the imposter syndrome. When you're going, oh, I'm only really doing this because, I might be good at this, but that's only because I'm really bad at being around people. When you go back to that previous point where you focus on the facts and not the feelings, the sky is blue because the sky is blue, not because the sky is blue because I like blue. It's not I'm saying that nobody turned up to your workshop because nobody turned up my workshop. It's instead you trying to justify that somehow. Nobody turned up my workshop because I'm a loner and nobody likes me. Another area is you can't really know everything straight away. Remember back to the idea of starting in a new job. You can either get the 4 weeks training, so you're utterly prepared when you hit the floor, or you just get thrown in and they say, here's your computer, off you go. It's natural when you're starting something new that you won't get everything right. You can't get away with making no mistakes at all on the way to success. You're going to make a ton of them. I've made tons of, I've lost probably in the realm of a couple of $1 million at least, just in mistakes I've made over business. And you look at that and go, a couple of $1 million. Oh my God. It's amazing how that adds up. It adds up mighty quick when it comes to business, when you're dealing with expensive products and expensive services. It's just that not everyone's talking about their failures. And because people tend to not talk about their failures and only talk about successes, and they only tend to celebrate success and tell people that success, it's stigmatized failure. It means then that the slightest failure makes us feel like a fraud, that we're not able to or competent of carrying out anything because no one talks about it. Asking questions doesn't make you weak. In fact, I say in any of my live workshops, when I'm sitting down a group of people, the only stupid question is not asking that question. No question is stupid, because it's my responsibility to make sure the knowledge is shared with you. It's your responsibility to make sure you get the most out of this that you can. Needing guidance or even extra time to be able to carry out a task doesn't make you dumb, stupid, or incompetent. What it makes you is wanting to do the thing right. And when you want to do that thing right, you really want to be able to carry this thing out the best way you possibly can, then you will take extra time. And as you do it more and more, you get better at it, right? If you keep forcing yourself to work at everybody else's pace, then you're going to make more mistakes and feel like a failure. And it's going to make you feel like more of a failure every time you make a mistake. So give yourself a break. This one is really important because it's so not done celebrating the wins. The next time someone says something nice to you about your work, about you, about what you look like, say thank you. Doesn't matter, unless they're being really sleazy about it. In that case, just like go, ooh, walk away. But if someone compliments you on your work, thank them. You don't need to bookend the win with justifications about how you got there, or how, you've been lucky, you've got just natural talent, you haven't really had to work hard, everyone really did, it's a team effort, it's a team job. Take the win. There's sometimes in life we feel like we've got so few wins coming our way, so why would you throw away a win when it comes your way? Celebrate the win, accept the compliment, and then practice the habit then of also congratulating others on their wins as well. It actually becomes easier for you to accept your wins when you're someone who's generous with your compliments of what you achieved. I won't forget the time when a young fella who won an award at the Northern Territory Digital Awards this year, he was surprised that he won. He was so happy to have won. He was so humble in his winning, but he accepted it with a big smile, and he was so proud of himself. And I saw him working in his side gig job and at a function center, and I walked up and said, "Oh, you're X, aren't you?" And he said, "Yeah, hi." And it's a bit awkward. I said, "Oh no, I saw you at the Digital Awards. You won an amazing prize for the work you did on early detection of DDoS attacks in cybersecurity." He was like, "You remember that? Oh my God!" And he was so impressed that I remembered who he was, what he won, and what he actually won it for. So therefore, that's part of my therapy, my internal therapy, to be able to better accept compliments, to better accept people saying that I've done something good, is that I then become better at telling other people how they got good. That's one of the things that my mentor actually helped me with and actually got me to do. If you want to be able to accept praise and without bookending it with all these justifications and all these things that make you look like a dumb idiot, then start complimenting other people, but be very genuine and specific about it. Don't just say, "Yeah, well done, mate." Go, "Hey, well done. I like the way that you did this, this, and this. That was brilliant, mate. Well done." And then the better you get at telling other people, you'll also recognize imposter syndrome in them, which will flag back to you when you go, "Oh my goodness, that's what I do. That's so ugly and so awkward. I should not do that anymore." Celebrate the wins, okay? And then delay the judgment. If you feel it creeping up, and you're going, "I just have to put myself down again," well, then don't have to blurt out to everybody you got this imposter syndrome thing. Pull it back a bit. Don't tell everyone. Just tell your one person if you need to, or message them and say, "Oops, I just had an imposter syndrome moment." And then they go, "Yeah, you know what? You can get better at this. Just make sure the next person you accept the compliment." Do a deal with yourself as well, that you won't harshly judge yourself until you've been at the task for a certain amount of time. And this is what I mean is, if you just started your business last week and you haven't managed to finish that course, or you haven't managed to achieve that milestone, don't beat yourself up about it because you only started last week. No one's expecting you to be brilliant today. You'll get brilliant at it later. You don't have to be a genius yet. Be a genius down the track. Delay your judgment till when you've actually done enough hard work to be able to objectively judge your work. Because for now, you're too early in. As a small business owner, you're too soon. If you're not yet, in a position where your side gig or your small business is supporting you financially, then you're not yet in the position to be able to harshly judge yourself. You're not there yet. Once you're in the position where you are successful, then you can look at things through a fine-tooth comb and actually say, this is what I need to do. This is what I need. And you can be then very objectively critical, but not full of criticism. You know what I mean? That's where you go, you're critiquing something as an outside observer saying, I can see how this would have been better if I had done it this way, rather than saying, you're such an idiot. Why didn't you do it in that first place, in the way in the first place? You're such a fraud and a fake and a sham. That's where the mind goes. So delaying that judgment until you've actually done the achievement, it's probably a hard one to do. Stick to this one, celebrating the wins first, and celebrate other people's wins with them as well. And start doing that on LinkedIn and Facebook. Start congratulating people on the things that they've done. They've taken the moment to actually shine. Let them shine. By watching them shine and seeing how it really fills their cup, you'll see how the same thing can fill your cup. Do you want to dig more into your business mindset with a guide? You can do that through this very same program, the Digital Solutions Program. If you're not already a part of it, $44 if you're in Queensland, Northern Territory, or Western Australia, gets you 3 hours of one-to-one advisory, 1 hour sessions with someone like myself or someone else as well. If there's something you've learned through this and you want to talk about it, there's some amazing people. I can put one now, Kasia McNaught, who's in Western Australia, is fantastic with all this mindset stuff. She's really, really sharp on it. I can help you out with this as well. But if you wanted to talk with a woman, Kasia is an amazing person to talk to. And then you get access to unlimited access. Forget the 4 hours. It's unlimited access to all these workshops and webinars as well. I thank you so much for joining me. If you'd like to reach out at all, have a chat about any of these things you've learned, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and my email address, dante@businessstation.com.au is a place to find me. In the meantime, I really want to thank you for taking time out of your business to be a better person with your business. You can't run a business without learning some stuff along the way. And I thank you for choosing this hour to have learned it with me. See you in the next one.